Thank you very much for joining me in this video. I'm going to depart a little bit from my normal approach on my Monday morning videos. Normally these Monday morning videos are meant to be tips and techniques. I might talk to you about RICO guidelines. I might talk to you about TRESA and some of the intricacies of TRESA. I might talk to you about clauses or best practices and so on. Hopefully it's some of the things that you can use on a day-to-day basis. But today I'm going to rant a little bit about organized real estate. And bear with me, and I hope I don't offend any of you. That's not my intent. But I want to share some things that I think are important in where I see the industry now and where I see the industry possibly going. Recently, last week, I had to go to Toronto and go to the Toronto Real Estate Board and attend a course. And there were a number of people in the course, and everybody in the course was a broker or a manager. And what was happening, and what's happened more and more in the Toronto Real Estate Board, is when somebody is taken to discipline for some reason or other, and they are fined, they're also fining the brokerage and the broker of record. And so these broker of records were forced to take a course because of infractions that their salespeople were deemed to have committed. And I'll tell you, they were not happy, the people that were in that course. They weren't happy being in there, forced to take the course, and they weren't happy about being assessed fines. Some of them were passing these fines on to their salespeople on top of the fines that they got, and some of them were eating the fines themselves. But they weren't thrilled. Now, we're in a little bit different situation because I'm the member of TREB, and so I'm co-listing with you. You're not a member of TREB, so I'm in the front line. I get fined as the participant as well as the broker. And let me tell you a couple of the reasons why we were fined. One of them was, in the remarks copy, it said, call if running late. Understand the reason why the restriction is there is if a salesperson passes along a listing to one of his clients, they don't want to direct the calls to another brokerage. I understand that. But it didn't say call Fred, call Sally, call such and such. It just said call if running late. I explained that to him, didn't matter. The other one, we were a day or two late on fulfilling a condition or making a change. Those two things resulted in a $3,300 fine and 2 courses that had to be taken. And so I think, personally, that organized real estate has lost their way. I don't mean to pick on the Toronto Real Estate Board. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Niagara Association of Realtors and so on. I think they've lost their vision. I think they've lost the understanding of why they're really there. Let me give you an example. The Canadian Real Estate Association, as of the start of this year, has decided that you shouldn't be able to operate with exclusive listings. Now they say, well, we're not really saying that. You can. You just can't put a sign on the lawn. You can't advertise it. You can't promote it. You can't put it on social media. If you do any of those things, it's got to be MLS within 3 days. See, I don't think that's their place. That, to me, is interference with a broker's model. How the broker and the seller wants to operate should be between the broker and the seller. I don't think that's CREA's place. So we can drop down to the Ontario Real Estate Association and look at it provincially. Ontario Real Estate Association came up with the idea it would be great to have health insurance. And I understand with 98,000 members, if they make $10 per member, there's an extra $1 million. I get that. But they're not in the business of making health insurance mandatory. And that's the critical thing. It's when it's mandatory. It's when exclusive becomes mandatory, you can't do it. It's when health insurance becomes mandatory. Their argument is, well, if it wasn't mandatory, people wouldn't use it. We wouldn't have that many people. We couldn't provide the same rate. Doesn't matter. They are interfering in the broker's model and stepping beyond what their purpose is. And then we can go down to the local board. Here in the Niagara board, they had decided some 4 or 5 years ago to make electronic lockboxes mandatory. And they said if the seller wants a manual lockbox and the brokerage wants a manual lockbox, we don't care. You can't have a manual lockbox. If you put 2 lockboxes on, you're in breach. You have to use an electronic lockbox. I'm the one, pretty much every weekend for the last 4.5 years, that gets contacts and calls and emails from Toronto brokers, primarily Toronto agents, wanting to know how to access properties. It's not the people who made the decision, but the point is it wasn't their mandate to make the decision because they're interfering with how a broker and their clients are operating their business model. And that's what I see happening all along. What the organized real estate needs to understand is they're not a board of directors. They are not designed to set policy. They're a service organization. They came into existence on every level so that the agents representing sellers and buyers could get help marketing the property, exposing the information of the property to the public, and bringing buyers and sellers together. That's what they're there for. They're there to be a service organization. And I think when they start deciding that, they should step in and dictate to the broker and to the salesperson whether they can take an exclusive listing or not, or whether they should have health care or not, or whether they should use a manual lockbox or not. And then we get into fines, this whole business of fines, and the fines, I think, are really out of control. I'll give you an example with the NAGO board for just a second. And again, apologize, I'm ranting. I won't do that again next week. But we get fined on one particular occasion, and I challenged it. I said, this doesn't make any sense. We didn't commit this. We didn't commit such and such and so and so. And the person at the board level looked at it and said, you know, you're right. We'll retract the fine. But then they said, but that's all right. We'll get you somewhere else. I think they've missed the point of what it's all about. What's fines, if fines are necessary, what they're meant to accomplish. You know, in the U.S., you've got a separation between your board and your MLS. And you can get MLS services without belonging to the local board. Belonging to the local board is really optional. And in fact, you can have board of choice, that where your geographic location of your office is doesn't dictate what board you have to belong to. And if you're in a particular board and you get fined $11,000 or $12,000 because you didn't report something in a timely fashion, you know what? It won't happen a second time because you won't be a member of that board. And I think anytime we've got a monopoly, and whether it's a Canadian Real Estate Association, Ontario Real Estate Association, Niagara Association of Realtors, Toronto Real Estate Board, the City Hall, anytime you get a monopoly, you got to be very, very, very careful. And I think where I see it going, I think you move the clock ahead a little bit. I think we're going to have a provincial-wide database. And I think OREA can handle that. And I think in terms of ethics, we're going to have RICO handling ethics. And the boards are going to be optional. And I think the boards, and then don't get me wrong, I know that you're involved in boards, some of you, and I get that. And I appreciate the courses that are being offered and the things that are being offered on a board level. But all of a sudden it becomes optional. And as soon as it becomes optional, it's the same as salespeople out in the field and brokerages, running brokerages out in the field. You've got to make sure that you're providing adequate service and better than adequate service, or you can be replaced. And once we get away from this monopoly and we move into a choice environment, and the organized real estate get that they're a service provider, I think we're well on our way to a really better functioning model and environment in practice real estate. Again, I hope it didn't offend anybody, but I think these things need to be said. Thank you for investing your time. Talk to you again next week.